Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with your EyeOpener report for BoilingFrogsPost.com. As we have demonstrated over the past several weeks here on the EyeOpener, health freedom is a subject of growing importance for citizens of the United States and freedom lovers around the world, as would-be authorities like the American Food and Drug Administration attempt to assert ever more control over our daily lives. Presuming to tell us what medicines we must or must not take, what we can or cannot say about our experiences with natural medicines, and even what type of milk we may or may not consume, the system is quickly devolving into outright tyranny. As in so many other cases in the battle for cognitive liberty, that very tyranny is in fact waking up untold numbers to a larger agenda that they never dreamt existed. Prodded out of complacency by the prospect of forced vaccinations, or the dawning realization that fluoridated water is in fact forced medication without consent, or the increasing restrictions on free speech in the arena of alternative medicine, or the crackdown on organic produce and raw milk in favor of preservative-laden industrial-produced big agra GMO food, people are finally beginning to take an interest in the underlying issue of just how much say the government has over their own natural right to choose what they do with their own bodies. And as with so many other types of tyranny, as the people awaken to this abrogation of their natural rights, they are learning that the system depends almost entirely on their complicity, and that their ability to simply put their foot down and say no to the would-be tyrant is a significant step toward reclaiming ownership of themselves and their bodies.
Healthcare workers from across the state line the steps of the Capitol in Albany protesting a state mandate which requires them to get the H1N1 flu vaccine or be fired. New York's healthcare workers say they are not against being vaccinated. They're concerned that it could not be safe, and they don't understand why it's mandated. Speakers bringing up a number of concerns, saying the requirement is a violation of their civil rights. Ralliers say everyone should have a choice, and the government has no right to put chemicals in people's bodies. Some healthcare workers say they will refuse to take the shots based on principle. Some are already looking for new jobs.
Next to Calgary, that city has decided to stop putting fluoride in its drinking water. City Council yesterday voted overwhelmingly in favor of removing the chemical after 20 years of using it. Brian Labby's following the story. He's live with us from Calgary. And Brian, why were they even looking at this at all?
Well, there was a group of aldermen, Heather, the majority of council actually, about 10 aldermen who really pushed to get this item back on the agenda.
What power does this government legitimately have when the product is safe to deny access to the American people to that product? That is an oppressive government. That is a tyrannical government.
Well, what we're trying to achieve is a fundamental awareness of some of the issues that are going on, like how many people in our country know that the FDA is spending their tax dollars on an undercover sting, an armed raid of an Amish farmer for milk, for producing milk? I mean, we're not talking about anything other than milk here.
The resistance to this agenda looks slightly different in each country, in each region, in each municipality, and for each issue. But broadly speaking, it involves like-minded individuals, energized by their passion for the issues involved, coming together to boycott, lobby, or otherwise change the system. And time and again, when such action is taken, positive results are achieved. One of the clearest examples of this is in the arena of water fluoridation. Unable to any longer cover up the growing mountain of evidence from the National Academy of Sciences, Harvard Medical, and other bodies, demonstrating the inefficacy and the long-term health hazards of fluoridating the water supply, the EPA was forced in January of last year to lower the recommended fluoride level in drinking water from 1.2 milligrams per liter to 0.7 milligrams per liter. Although not a decisive victory by any means, that the EPA was forced to backtrack on literally decades of arguments that the recommended levels were safe and effective is in itself a momentous decision demonstrating that with enough public pressure and scientific evidence, even bureaucratic giants can be made to change their harmful policies. Emboldened by this turnaround, municipality after municipality in the US, Canada, Ireland, and elsewhere have been mounting campaigns to remove the fluoride from local drinking water supplies. And in case after case, those campaigns are being greeted with success. One such story is that of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where the fluoride was recently removed from the drinking water supply after decades of fluoridation. opponents of fluoride in Calgary, who include doctors, dentists, health professionals, and concerned members of the public, have spent years campaigning against the practice on the grounds that it is unsafe, ineffective, and amounts to a citywide enforced medication regimen without consent or controls. Last year, the city finally relented, agreeing to remove the fluoride entirely. Early last year, I talked to one of those involved with the campaign to get the fluoride removed from the water supply, Dr. James Beck of the University of Calgary, about the history of the campaign and how it eventually prevailed.
The current furor in Calgary started on I believe it was February 5th, when in the Calgary Herald, a major newspaper in Calgary, published the news that Alderman Drew Farrell was going to introduce a motion to stop before City Council to stop fluoridation. And at that time, she had 9 of her colleagues, so that would be 10 aldermen on a council of 14 aldermen and 1 mayor. She had 10 who wanted to stop fluoridation. And so the issue was then thrust once again into the limelight in Calgary, and a lot of discussion occurred. At the next council meeting, Alderman Farrell introduced that motion, and it was not accepted because there were several new councilors, aldermen, by the way, we're changing to councilor at the next civic election, so I'm mixing this up. But some aldermen were new to the council, and others even didn't feel they knew enough about fluoridation to make a decision on it. So they wanted to have a public consultation. They mandated the Standing Policy Committee on Utilities and their Environment to hold a public consultation, which they did on January 26th. And this went on from 9:30 in the morning till 8 or so in the evening, and about 40 people testified before the committee, and others submitted written testimony. And that same evening, the committee decided to recommend to the city council that they stop fluoridation by a vote of 4 or 5 to 1. It was either 4 or 5 in favor of the recommendation to stop fluoridation and 1 against. The interest in the public consultation, I think, was very strong. And there were a lot of testimonies there, very thoughtful, from people who were not scientists or physicians or dentists, but who had stories to tell and felt very strongly about the issue. And there were some who favored fluoridation, who gave their viewpoints. And the Alberta Health Services had 5 people there, there were 2 medical officers of health and 1 dental officer of health, a dietitian and a community health worker, and they said a lot of things that were just plain wrong. And there was a considerable spin doctoring. You know, they don't like to say that fluoride's a medicine because they don't want us to say they're mass medicating. 1 medical officer of health in private finally agreed after a verbal struggle to say mass administration, but not mass medication. That's this kind of spin doctoring they do. And so I think the mood has changed, and I hope that it's changed significantly enough to stop it here. In addition to Calgary, though, we have considerable hope for 2 more cities in southern Alberta, and that might very well stop fluoridation this year. So that's a good sign. And if we could get Edmonton, we would have 2/3 or more of the population of Alberta. And the next step is to make it illegal in Alberta, and then on to Canada.
Fluoridation is just one of many battlefronts of health freedom in which concerned citizens are getting energized and organized to resist governmental tyranny. In other areas too, citizens and health professionals are standing up to the system and winning. In the summer of 2009, at the height of the swine flu scare, doctors and nurses across Britain were surveyed on whether or not they would comply with NHS recommendations to be vaccinated with the then untested and experimental H1N1 vaccine. In both cases, only a minority said that they would be willing to take the shots, with just 41% of doctors and only 37% of nurses saying they were willing to comply. In New York State, plans for the mandatory vaccination of hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers prompted a mass wave of protests from nurses across the state. After months of such protests, the state Supreme Court blocked the order, saying that the state health commissioner did not have the authority to issue such an edict. In the wake of the Rawsome Foods raids and other such raids on raw milk sellers across the United States, Canada, and other countries, the popularity of raw milk is skyrocketing. Producers across the board are noting increased sales of raw milk and increased awareness of their product. Raw milk vending machines are even growing in popularity in Europe. Organic foods are already seeing a boom in popularity, and these new buying trends have already had one verifiable victory. Several years ago, consumer backlash against milk containing recombinant bovine growth hormone prompted major wholesalers to drop the product from store shelves. There is still much more action that needs to be taken. The ability for producers of non-GMO foods to label their foods as such needs to be guaranteed and standardized. The medical martial law legislation that was passed in the wake of the swine flu scare needs to be repealed. The laws against the consumption of cannabis and other non-dangerous natural medicines needs to be dropped, and the war on drugs should be consigned to the dustbin of history. But overall, we can see that progress is being made, and more people are waking up to these issues every day. Last week, I had the chance to talk to Mike Adams, author, researcher, and editor of naturalnews.com, about the growing awakening in the public and the possibility for a true health freedom revolution.
We are still stuck in a mentality of enslavement, self-enslavement. Despite what people will say to you, the majority, the masses, I would say, prefer to live under a system where they're told what to do, where someone else makes the decisions for them. Taking responsibility for your own life or even your own health, it's a scary thing. It takes courage. It's much easier to go to your doctor and say, "Doctor, you tell me what's wrong, you fix it, it's your responsibility." And that's what most people do. Even when they go to holistic practitioners, acupuncturists, chiropractic, whatever, they'll say, "It's your job to fix my problem." Now, as long as people have that externalization of the power over their own health, they will be victims. That is a victim stance to say, external forces control my outcome. But once you reverse that and you internalize that force and you take responsibility for it as an adult, then the power shifts to you. It takes courage. It might be a little fearful for some people at first to say, "Hey, wait a minute, my health outcome is my responsibility, so maybe I should put down the donuts, and then I don't have to go see the doctor and tell him to fix me. Maybe I should just start working on myself." And that could be at every level. That can be at physical, that can be at emotional, that can be at spiritual, that can be in relationships. There's so many levels where you can work on yourself. So what I see, the big trend overall, James, is humanity is now shifting from a phase of childish ignorance and being, sort of like an infant mindset into an age of more adult thinking, which is self-responsibility. So that's the shift that we need to see. We've got to become more adults. And I don't mean chronologically, I mean philosophically.
In the end, this fight, like the fight for all other forms of natural rights, rests in our hands. No longer is it good enough to simply put these issues in the hands of the legislators and regulators and trust that they will make the right decision over what to do with our lives, our health, and our bodies. More and more, people are awakening to a new paradigm, one in which such matters are not to be delegated to representatives, decided on by committee, or regulated into existence by bureaucrats. Instead, a growing section of the public is rediscovering the responsibility of freedom and reclaiming their natural sovereignty over their own bodies. And with more people than ever before becoming energized in the fight for control over their own medicines, foods, free speech, and bodies, who could argue that this is not a healthy state of affairs? This video is brought to you by the subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information on this and other topics, please go to BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information and commentary from James Corbett, please go to CorbettReport.com.